Story number 1. Shadows in the elevator. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that January evening at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles etched into my mind like a persistent shadow. It was supposed to be a routine security shift. Just another night monitoring the cameras in one of the city's most notorious hotels. But what unfolded that night blurred the lines between reality and nightmare, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about the darkness that can dwell within the human psyche. The Cecil Hotel had always held a grim reputation. Located in the heart of downtown LA, it was a place where the glamorous facade of the city met the harsh realities of life on the streets. Over the years, the hotel had been the backdrop to countless tragedies and mysteries, each adding to its haunted legacy. As a night security guard, I had heard the stories, whispers of restless spirits, unexplained noises, and eerie apparitions roaming the hallways. But I never believed in ghosts. Until that night. It was January 2013, a month that seemed colder than usual, the wind biting through the streets with a ferocity that matched the turmoil brewing within the hotel's walls. My name is Michael Turner, and I had been working at the Cecil for 3 years. Most nights were uneventful, the hum of the surveillance system and the occasional late-night guest keeping me company. But this night was different. At around 2:15 a.m., my radio crackled to life. "Turner, we've got a report from room 1046. Guest behaving erratically. Demands to leave the elevator immediately. Can you check it out?" I glanced at the clock. 2:15 a.m. Perfect time for unsettling occurrences. Grabbing my flashlight, I made my way to the elevator bank. The dimly lit corridors stretching out before me like the veins of a dark, living entity. The elevator doors were already open, the stale air wafting out as if inviting me in. As I approached, I noticed a figure standing just inside the elevator. A young woman, her hair disheveled, staring blankly ahead. Her eyes were wide, unseeing, and her movements were jerky, almost unnatural. She was dressed in a vintage-style coat, the kind that seemed out of place in the modern setting of the Cecil. "Ma'am, is everything all right? Do you need assistance?" I asked gently, trying to keep my voice calm and steady. She didn't respond. Instead, she began to pace back and forth, her steps uneven and frantic. I reached out a hand, but she recoiled as if in pain, her eyes darting towards the mirror above the elevator door. In that reflection, for a split second, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A fleeting glimpse of a pale, ghostly face staring back at me, its mouth moving silently in a scream, shaking off the unease. I decided to escort her to her room. "Let's get you back to your suite," I suggested, taking her arm gently. She hesitated but eventually allowed me to guide her out of the elevator. As we walked down the hallway, the air grew colder, the lights flickering intermittently as if struggling to stay on. The elevator's mirrored walls seemed to close in, distorting our reflections into grotesque parodies of ourselves. I could feel her tension, the palpable fear that emanated from her presence. "Please, I need to leave," she whispered suddenly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the fluorescent lights. I nodded, understanding the urgency in her tone. We reached the stairwell, and I motioned for her to take the stairs instead of the elevator. As she ascended, the sound of footsteps echoed eerily, the rhythm too deliberate to be my own. I followed closely, my flashlight casting long shadows that danced along the walls. Suddenly, the stairwell plunged into darkness. The lights had gone out, leaving me enveloped in pitch blackness. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam flickering to life just as a cold gust of wind swept through the stairwell, extinguishing the light once more. Panic surged through me as I realized I wasn't alone. A faint, desperate whisper filled the air, the words indistinct but laden with anguish. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The whispering grew louder, more insistent, until it formed coherent words. "Help me, please." My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to locate the source of the voice. The air grew thick with an oppressive presence. the temperature dropping to a bone-chilling cold. I could feel a weight pressing down on me, the very essence of fear manifesting in the darkness around me. Suddenly, a shadowy figure emerged from the gloom, its form shifting and wavering like smoke caught in a breeze. It was the same ghostly face I had seen in the elevator mirror, now fully formed and staring directly at me with hollow, soulless eyes. The figure began to move towards me, each step deliberate and unnerving. I backed away, tripping over my own feet as the apparition advanced. I don't understand," I stammered, my voice cracking under the strain of fear. "What do you want?" The ghostly woman reached out a hand, her fingers elongated and cold to the touch. "Find me justice," her voice echoed, a haunting plea that resonated deep within me. Desperate to escape, I turned to flee down the stairs, the apparition mirroring my every move, her presence a constant reminder of the unresolved pain that bound her to the mortal realm. The stairwell seemed endless, the walls closing in as the darkness thickened, swallowing me whole. Just as I felt myself losing hope, the lights flickered back on, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as suddenly as it had descended. I found myself back in the elevator, the young woman still standing by the doors, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice softening. I couldn't move on without knowing the truth. Before I could respond, she vanished, leaving me alone in the elevator with the lingering sense of her presence. Shaken to my core, I made my way back to the security office, the images of that night haunting my every thought. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the ghostly woman was reaching out for help, her story untold and her pain unacknowledged. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the hotel's archives, piecing together the fragments of her tragic tale. Eleanor Hartman, a name that had been lost to time but now demanded to be remembered. She had been a promising young artist, her life cut short by a series of unfortunate events that led to her wrongful accusation and untimely death in room 1046. The case had been swiftly closed, the truth buried beneath layers of corruption and deceit that tainted the hotel's legacy. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the Cecil, my resolve stronger than ever. I wanted to give Eleanor the justice she deserved, to free her spirit from the chains of her unresolved anguish. As I stood once more in room 1046, the air heavy with the weight of her sorrow, I called out to her, "I'm here to help you, Eleanor. Your story won't be forgotten." The room responded with a flicker of green light, the same eerie glow that had haunted the hotel for years. Eleanor's apparition materialized once more, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of hope and despair. "Thank you," she whispered, the words carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken sorrows. "Now, I can finally rest." As the green light enveloped the room, Eleanor's spirit began to fade, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as peace settled over the hotel. The screams and whispers that had plagued room 1046 were silenced, replaced by a serene stillness that spoke of closure and redemption. Driving away from the Cecil Hotel that night, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment and peace. Eleanor's story had been heard, her injustice acknowledged, and her spirit set free from the chains of her tragic past. The Cecil stood silent once more, its dark legacy transformed by the truth that had finally been uncovered. Years have passed since that pivotal night, but the memory of Eleanor Hartman remains a haunting reminder of the power of compassion and the importance of seeking justice for those who cannot speak for themselves. I continue my work with a deeper respect for the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding, knowing that sometimes the most profound connections are forged in the most unexpected encounters. Whenever I pass by the Cecil Hotel, now restored and thriving with new life, I can't help but glance towards room 1046, the place where darkness once reigned and now serves as a testament to the enduring human spirit. Eleanor's legacy lives on, a beacon of hope amidst the shadows of the past, reminding us all that, even in the depths of despair, there is always a chance for redemption and peace. Story number 2. Shadows beneath Centralia. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that January evening in Centralia seared into my mind like the relentless flames burning beneath the earth. It was supposed to be a simple investigation, a chance to document the eerie remnants of a town consumed by its own dark history. Instead, it became a descent into a nightmare that blurred the lines between the living and the dead, leaving me questioning the very fabric of reality. Centralia, Pennsylvania, a name that once echoed with the bustling sounds of miners and the warmth of a close-knit community. But that all changed in January 1962 when a forest fire ignited the coal mines beneath the town, a blaze that refused to be extinguished. Decades later, the fire still raged invisibly below ground, creating fissures in the earth, releasing steam, and filling the nights with unsettling screams that no one could explain. The town was abandoned, streets empty, buildings crumbling, yet whispers of restless spirits lingered in the shadows. I had heard the stories growing up, tales spun by older residents who spoke of miners' ghosts wandering the abandoned streets, their tormented souls trapped by the unending flames. As a journalist with a penchant for the supernatural, Centralia was the perfect subject for my next feature. Armed with my camera, notebook, and a healthy dose of skepticism, I set out to uncover the truth behind the legends. Arriving in Centralia on a chilly January morning, the sun struggled to pierce through the heavy fog that enveloped the town. The once vibrant streets were now desolate, overgrown with weeds and nature reclaiming its territory. The remnants of homes stood silent, windows shattered, doors hanging ajar like the vacant eyes of forgotten souls. I parked my car near the town's edge, where the skeletal remains of the mine entrance loomed ominously against the gray sky. My first stop was the abandoned post office, its walls scarred by time and neglect. As I explored the decaying building, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, and the faint sound of footsteps echoed through the empty halls. Shaking off the unease, I focused on my mission, documenting the unexplained phenomena that plagued Centralia. Venturing deeper into the town, I reached the center where the old miners' hall once stood. The structure was mostly intact, its doors still bearing the faded emblem of the local miners' union. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mold and dampness. I set up my camera, capturing the eerie silence that enveloped the room. It was then that I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible over the creaking of the old building. "Help us!" I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Gathering my courage, I followed the sound, moving towards the back of the hall where the shadows grew deeper. The temperature dropped suddenly, my breath visible in the cold air as the whispers intensified, forming a chorus of desperate pleas. "Find us! Set us free!" A chill ran down my spine as the room began to distort, the walls bending and warping as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. My flashlight flickered, casting grotesque shadows that morphed into the forms of weary miners, their faces etched with pain and longing. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my camera as the apparitions reached out towards me, their hollow eyes pleading for salvation. "Why are you here?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay composed. One of the ghostly figures stepped forward, its form more defined than the others. "We are trapped," it whispered, the words echoing through the hall. "The fire consumes us, and we cannot escape." I swallowed hard, realizing the depth of their suffering. "Is there something I can do to help you?" The apparition's eyes bore into mine, a silent plea that transcended words. "Remember us? Tell our story." As if on cue, the ground beneath my feet trembled, cracks spiderwebbing across the floor as the invisible fire roared below. The whispers grew louder, blending with the sound of the flames, creating a symphony of anguish that filled the room. I backed away, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on me, making it difficult to breathe. Suddenly, the visions intensified. the ghostly miners swirling around me in a whirlwind of sorrow and rage. Desperation clawed at my sanity as I struggled to maintain control. The line between reality and the supernatural blurring before my eyes. I grabbed my camera, snapping photos in a frantic attempt to capture the inexplicable phenomena. But the images were distorted, filled with shadows and ghostly figures that defied explanation. With every ounce of strength, I forced myself to leave the miners' hall, the apparitions trailing behind me like dark specters refusing to let go. As I navigated the treacherous streets, the ground beneath me continued to fissure, steam rising in thick plumes that obscured my vision. The sounds of the restless spirits echoed through the night, their screams a constant reminder of the town's tragic past. Reaching the edge of Centralia, I turned to take one last look at the desolate town, this haunted history now etched into my soul. The greenish glow of the mine fire shimmered beneath the earth, a silent sentinel to the eternal torment of the trapped souls. I knew that my story would not just be another feature, but a testament to the lives lost and the spirits that lingered in the shadows of Centralia. Driving away, the town receded into the fog, but the memory of those haunted whispers and ghostly apparitions remained vivid in my mind. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility to honor their plea, to bring their story to light, and perhaps, in doing so, offer them the peace they so desperately sought. Weeks later, my article on Centralia was published, capturing the attention of readers far and wide. The photographs, though distorted, conveyed the eerie presence that haunted the abandoned town. Letters poured in from former residents and paranormal enthusiasts, sharing their own encounters and reinforcing the legends that had long been whispered in hushed tones. But the most haunting response came from an elderly woman named Martha, a lifelong resident of Centralia. In her letter, she recounted her own experiences, the nights filled with screams and the sight of ghostly figures wandering the streets. "Thank you for remembering us," she wrote, her handwriting shaky but resolute. "May your words bring us the peace we've been denied for so long." Her words struck a chord deep within me, a reminder that the stories I sought to uncover were not just tales of the supernatural, but echoes of real lives, forever intertwined with the fate of Centralia. I knew that my journey into the heart of darkness had not only brought me closer to the truth, but had also forged a connection with the restless spirits seeking redemption. Years have passed since that fateful investigation, but the memory of Centralia remains a haunting presence in my mind. I continue to seek out the forgotten and the lost, driven by the stories that refuse to fade into obscurity. And whenever I think of that desolate town and the shadows that danced beneath its streets, I'm reminded of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown, and the enduring power of empathy to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Centralia stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unending quest for justice and peace. Its haunted legacy serves as a solemn reminder that some places hold secrets too profound and too painful for the living to uncover, their stories etched into the very fabric of time, waiting for someone brave enough to listen and remember. Story number 3. The Frozen Echo. I still wake up in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, the memory of that January night in Minnesota haunting me like a relentless ghost. It was supposed to be just another routine patrol during the infamous snowstorm, but what unfolded that evening blurred the lines between reality and nightmare, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about the darkness that can dwell within the human psyche. The year was 2000, a time when winter in Minnesota was both beautiful and brutal. The snowstorms here weren't just weather phenomena. They were tests of endurance, reminders of nature's indifferent power. I was Officer Tom Reynolds, a seasoned member of the Minnesota State Patrol, accustomed to the treacherous roads and the isolation that came with patrolling the vast, snow-covered highways. That night, the storm was particularly vicious. Flurries whipped the windshield of my cruiser, and visibility was reduced to mere feet. The wind howled like a pack of wild animals, and the temperature plummeted well below freezing. I had received a distress call from a driver who had lost control on Highway 61, a critical artery that connected the remote areas of our state. As I navigated the icy roads, the weight of my duty pressed down on me. Every patrol was a gamble, a balance between ensuring safety and braving the elements. I kept my headlights on high beam, slicing through the darkness, hoping to catch any sign of the stranded motorist. About an hour into my shift, I spotted the wreckage, a silver sedan, half submerged in a snowdrift, its front end crumpled from the impact. I parked a safe distance away, the sirens muted to avoid further disorientation. Approaching cautiously, I noticed the car was coated in a thick layer of ice, almost as if nature itself was attempting to conceal the scene. "Hello? Are you okay?" I called out, my voice muffled by the storm. There was no response, only the persistent drumming of snow against the vehicle. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way to the driver's side, the cold biting through my gloves. The door was ajar, the interior lit by the weak glow of my flashlight. The driver was nowhere to be found. Panic surged through me as I scanned the area, my mind racing with possibilities. Had they been injured? Or had something or someone taken them? I started a search, methodically checking the surroundings for any clues. The snowstorm made it difficult to see, but I was determined to find the missing driver. Hours passed with no sign of life, only the eerie silence that followed a catastrophic crash. Just as I was about to call it a night, a glimmer caught my eye. It was the car, now fully encased in ice, a frozen testament to the storm's wrath. The engine, surprisingly, was still warm, a perplexing detail that gnawed at my sense of reality. How could the car remain operational in such extreme cold? Curiosity overcame my exhaustion, and I approached the vehicle once more. My flashlight beam danced across the windshield, revealing something that made my blood run cold. Handprints etched into the glass, smeared with frost. They were fresh, as if someone had desperately tried to make contact before vanishing into the storm. My heart pounded as I reached out to touch the glass, the ice cold against my skin. The handprints seemed to writhe under my touch, the images distorted and blurred by the frost. I could swear I saw a face within the patterns, a visage of fear and desperation that mirrored my own unease. Suddenly, the engine let out a low rumble, startling me. The car had not been entirely inactive. I backed away, the realization sinking in that whatever had happened here was far from ordinary. The storm had intensified, the wind now a howling beast that seemed to press against every surface. Desperate for answers, I decided to return to the station and consult with my colleagues. As I drove back, the snowstorm showed no signs of abating, the roads slick and treacherous under my tires. My mind raced with theories: accident, foul play, or something more sinister. At the station, I recounted the events to Detective Laura Mitchell, a sharp-minded investigator with a knack for unraveling the most perplexing cases. Her expression was grave as she listened, the flickering light of the overhead lamp casting long shadows on her face. "Officer Reynolds, this is highly unusual," she began, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "A car with no occupants, warm engine, and fresh handprints? It doesn't add up. We need to dig deeper into this." Together, we delved into the records, searching for any missing person reports that matched the description of the vehicle and the circumstances. Days turned into weeks, and the case remained stubbornly cold. The snowstorm that had concealed the truth now a distant memory. But the mystery didn't fade. Each night, I found myself haunted by the image of those handprints, the eerie face that seemed to watch me from within the ice. Sleep eluded me, my mind replaying the events in a loop of fear and frustration. One evening, as I sat alone in my office, the phone rang, an unexpected call that sent a chill down my spine. It was a new missing person report, eerily similar to the driver I had never found. The caller described a vehicle that had slid off the road during a storm, with the engine remaining warm and no sign of the driver. But there was one crucial difference: they had seen handprints on the windshield, just like mine. My hands trembled as I hung up, the pieces of the puzzle finally connecting. The missing driver wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger, more sinister pattern that defied explanation. Laura and I knew we had to return to Highway 61, to face the storm and uncover the truth that had eluded us for so long. We organized a search party, gathering equipment and braving the elements as we made our way back to the wreckage. The storm had subsided slightly, but the air remained thick with tension. As we approached the icy vehicle, a sense of foreboding settled over us, the wind whispering through the trees like the breath of unseen spirits. This time, I wasn't alone. Laura stood beside me, her presence a comforting anchor amidst the chaos. We examined the car again, the handprints on the windshield now more prominent, the eerie face seemingly more defined under the harsh beam of our flashlights. "Look at this." Laura pointed to the dashboard, where the engine still glowed faintly. "It's like the car was running on its own, but there's no fuel source that could keep it warm for so long." I shook my head, the logic slipping away as the mystery deepened. "There's something here, Laura. Something we can't explain." Suddenly, the wind picked up, the snow swirling around us in a frenzied dance. The handprints began to shimmer, the images within them shifting and contorting once more. I felt a presence, a heavy weight pressing down on me as if the very air was alive with sorrow and rage. A figure materialized beside the car, its form flickering like a broken signal. It was the ghostly face I had seen before, now fully formed and staring at us with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through our souls. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the truth. The missing drivers were not victims of mere accidents or foul play, but something far more malevolent. "We need to help them," Laura whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "We need to set them free." I nodded, determination replacing fear. "But how? We don't even know what we're dealing with." The apparition began to move towards us, the air growing colder with each step. The whispers filled the air, voices of the lost echoing through the storm. "Remember us? Find the truth." A surge of adrenaline pushed me to act. I reached out a hand, trying to communicate with the restless spirits. "Tell us what you need. How can we help you find peace?" The ghostly figure stopped, the sorrow in its eyes deepening. "Reveal the truth. Uncover the lies. Justice for our suffering." A realization dawned on me: the handprints, the warm engine, the frozen echoes, they were all clues pointing to buried secrets, injustices that had been concealed by the very people sworn to protect the truth. The missing drivers were not just victims of nature's wrath, but casualties of a darker, hidden agenda that had remained shrouded in secrecy. Determined to uncover the truth, Laura and I began to investigate the history of Highway 61 and the wreckages that had plagued it for years. We discovered a series of cover-ups, evidence of illegal activities that had led to the disappearance of several drivers. Corrupt officials had orchestrated the accidents, eliminating anyone who posed a threat to their illicit operations. Armed with this knowledge, we confronted the remaining authorities involved, exposing the corruption that had allowed the tragedies to continue unchecked. The revelation sent shockwaves through the department, leading to arrests and the dismantling of the criminal network that had thrived in the shadows. As the truth came to light, the hauntings began to subside. The warm engines turned cold once more, and the handprints on the windshield faded into the ice, leaving behind only the echoes of justice served. The spirits of the lost drivers found peace, their restless souls finally free from the chains of their untimely deaths. But the memory of that night lingered, a haunting reminder of the thin line between duty and darkness, and the enduring power of truth to dispel even the most persistent shadows. I still patrol the snow-covered highways of Minnesota, the lessons of that January night etched into my soul. A constant vigilance against the unseen forces that seek to remain hidden in the frozen echoes of the past. Every time a storm approaches, I think back to the missing drivers and the restless spirits we helped release. Their stories a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unwavering pursuit of justice. The ice-covered wreckage serves as a silent sentinel, a reminder that some mysteries demand to be unraveled, no matter how deeply they are buried beneath the snow. And as long as the snow continues to fall, cloaking the roads in a veil of white, I remain ever watchful, knowing that the ghosts of Highway 61 may still whisper their stories, waiting for someone to listen and remember the truth that set them free. Story number 4. Whispers in the Winter House. I still wake up in the dead of night, the echoes of that January chilling my bones long after the sun has risen. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the chaos of city life and embrace the quiet serenity of rural Kansas. The Snyder family and I had found what seemed to be the perfect old house nestled at the edge of Willow Creek. Little did we know, the house held secrets darker than the winter nights that lay ahead. The drive from Kansas City was long and winding, the landscape gradually giving way to endless fields blanketed in snow. When we finally arrived, the house stood as a relic from another time, its white paint chipped and faded, windows boarded up except for the front porch that creaked under the weight of years of neglect. Despite its dilapidated appearance, there was something undeniably captivating about it. We saw potential where others saw decay. Moving in was a whirlwind of unpacking and settling into our new lives. The first few days were peaceful, the silence of the countryside a welcome change from the constant noise of the city. But as the nights grew longer and the winter deepened, an unsettling presence began to seep into our lives. It started with the crying, soft, mournful wails that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house. First, we dismissed them as the sounds of the wind or the settling of an old structure. But the cries became more distinct, more desperate, piercing the stillness of the night and echoing through the empty rooms. One evening, as I sat in the dimly lit living room, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. I glanced up, my heart pounding, but saw nothing. The room felt colder, the air thick with an unspoken tension. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination playing tricks, but the fear lingered like a shadow. Then came the objects moving on their own. It started with small things, cups sliding off tables, doors creaking open without a push. The house seemed to come alive, reacting to our presence with an eerie sentience. My wife, Laura, began to fear the nights, reluctant to turn off the lights for fear of what might lurk in the darkness. The most terrifying moments were the shadowy figures that roamed the halls, flickers of movement just beyond the corner of my eye, shapes that vanished when I turned to look. They seemed to watch us, their presence oppressive and filled with sorrow. I could almost feel their anguish, a lingering pain that hung heavy in the air. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the history of the house. Local archives revealed that the house had been the site of a brutal massacre during the winter of 1935. The previous owners, the Harrows family, had been accused of witchcraft and met a gruesome end at the hands of a vengeful mob. The cries and shadows we experienced were echoes of their tormented souls, trapped within the walls of the house. One particularly frigid night, the manifestations reached a horrifying peak. The crying turned into screaming, a cacophony of voices that filled every corner of the house. The temperature plummeted, frost forming on the windows and breath visible in the icy air. Laura and I huddled together, trying to stay warm as the house seemed to shudder with unseen forces. In the midst of the chaos, I felt a presence beside me, a cold, clammy hand gripping my shoulder. I spun around, flashlight in hand, but there was no one there. The screams intensified, blending with the whispers of the past, creating a symphony of despair that threatened to drive me mad. Desperate for answers, I sought the help of a local medium, Mrs. Whitaker, known for her ability to communicate with spirits. She arrived one stormy evening, her presence calm amidst the turmoil that engulfed our home. With her guidance, we performed a séance, reaching out to the restless souls trapped within the house. The room grew cold as Mrs. Whitaker began to chant, her voice a soothing balm against the tempest of our fears. The shadows seemed to retreat, the the screams fading into a haunting melody of sorrow. Suddenly, a figure materialized before us, a woman with hollow eyes and a sorrowful expression. It was Eleanor Harrow, the matriarch of the Harrow family, her spirit still tethered to the place of her untimely death. "Eleanor," Mrs. Whitaker whispered, her voice gentle yet commanding. "Why do you remain here? What do you seek?" Eleanor's gaze shifted between us, her sorrow palpable. "Justice," she replied, her voice echoing with centuries of pain. "Remember us. Let our stories be told." With those final words, Eleanor's apparition began to fade, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as if a great weight had been lifted from the house. The crying ceased, replaced by a serene stillness that spoke of peace and closure. In the days that followed, the house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The manifestations ceased, the shadows no longer lurking in the corners of our vision. The weight of the past had been lifted, the spirits finally finding solace in the acknowledgement of their suffering. Living in the old house became a testament to resilience and the enduring power of empathy. We honored the memory of the Harrow family, ensuring their stories were remembered and their suffering acknowledged. The house, once a place of torment, transformed into a sanctuary of peace, its dark legacy replaced by a hopeful future. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the lessons learned remain etched in my soul. The experience taught me that some places hold secrets too profound and too painful for the living to uncover. Their stories intertwined with the fabric of our existence. And as long as the winds whisper through the fields of Kansas, the echoes of the past will linger, a reminder that empathy and understanding can bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Whenever a storm approaches, I think back to those harrowing nights, the cries of the lost souls, and the shadows that once haunted our home. It serves as a solemn reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown, and the enduring power of compassion to heal even the deepest wounds. The Snyder family and I continue to live in the old house, our lives intertwined with the history that now serves as a beacon of hope rather than fear. And as I watch the snow fall gently outside our windows, I'm reminded that even in the darkest of winters, there is always a chance for redemption and peace. Story number 5. Midnight knock. Frozen echoes. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that eerie knock January 1995 like encounter in Chicago haunting my every thought. It was supposed to be just another night another shift patrolling the quiet suburbs of Texas. A routine part of my job as a night watchman for the city's morgue, leaving me questioning the very chilling ordeal that blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural. It was late October, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about the darkness that can dwell within the human psyche. In a serene stillness Chicago in January is unforgiving. My name is Officer David Harris of Lost Souls, and I've been patrolling the outskirts of Dallas city in a suffocating silence. Most nights the streets are deserted. The monotony the only of signs of life broken only by a street lamp or the distant echo of sirens. Minor accidents. My route took me along the odd noise complaint, a quiet thoroughfare that led directly to the city morgue. I was stationed at the edge of Elmwood Drive, already shrouded a quiet eerie stillness lined with neatly trimmed hedges and modest storm homes. Had hit earlier. My cruiser was parked leaving the city submerged under several feet of snow. Beam casting long shadows was that danced with the slight breeze. The world outside my patrol car into the comfort of the driver's seat, blur of white, enjoying the rare radio crack comes with a slow night. The static around punctuated by the dispatcher's monotonous my radio updates. Crackled to life. I was tired. Officer Harris. My bones aching. We have a call from the residence at 34 Elmwood Drive, and I pushed through the exhaustion. Hearing loud knocking around on the front door. 2:17 a.m. No one seen a distress call came through. I sighed softly. Unit 12. Pulling out my notepad. We have a report of an unidentified male found frozen on the corner of Oak and 34th I'm on my way. As I approached the house, the only sound was the rhythmic tapping of my watch against the pavement. It was the dead hour. The house stood when silent. Even the most resilient souls sought uninviting from the merciless winter. The front door was slightly ajar. I maneuvered the cruiser, an unusual sight that immediately set off alarm bells. My headlights cutting through the darkness a respectful like desperate beacons of hope. Grabbing my flashlight from the glove compartment, the sight that greeted me was both heartbreaking and unsettling. I called out. A lone figure lay sprawled across the unease creeping up my spine. His clothes drenched and clinging to his emaciated frame. I took a cautious step forward. His face was pale. The beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness to illuminate in the frigid air. The knocking had ceased. There were no signs of struggle, leaving an oppressive silence. No immediate cause of his demise. Just I reached out to push the unforgiving power of the cold, but it swung closed cautiously with a force. The crunch of my shiver down my spine. By the thick blanket. Is anyone there? The man showed no signs of life. More urgently this time, but something about his presence felt disturbingly my flashlight. Turning as I began the process of the flickering light casting strange shadows. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being beyond my sight. Back at my heart pounded in my chest. The cold was even more oppressive. The adrenaline sharpening my senses. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the telling myself it was probably just a prank, of machinery filled the air with a mechanical monotony. I decided to completed the intake process. My footsteps, the man's body placed carefully in the refrigerated unit. From room to room. His identity was unknown. Felt colder. His air thick with an unspoken that only deepened the mystery surrounding his untimely death. No signs of recent activity and despite exhaustive efforts, it was as if no one came forward to claim him. Frozen in the time, investigation yielded nothing. The living room, no missing person. I noticed something odd matched his description. Old and rotary no fingerprints could be found on his belongings. It was unplugged. It was as if he had simply vanished from existence. Yet I could swear leaving behind only the frozen remnants of long after I had turned off the flashlight. One night, I approached cautiously. As I was closing up my flashlight, revealing the intricate patterns approached me with a troubled expression. A remnant of a bygone era. You need to see this. Suddenly, she said, knocking resumed, her voice trembling louder this time. It's about the guy we found on Oak Street. My blood ran cold as I spun around. I followed her to the small illuminating the doorway where the security footage was displayed. There was no one there. Yet the sound persisted. We reviewed the tapes and from the night he was found. Someone's watching as I had interacted. I muttered under my breath. Everything seemed normal racing until I noticed something peculiar. Or something. I decided to set up my body camera, stood a shadowy figure watching any unusual activity. I thought it was just a trick of the light. The knocking as we rewound the footage, a staccato figure became more distinct with malevolent intent. Dressed in a similar outfit to the victim, the fear threatening to overtake my professionalism. His face obscured, a shadow darted across the hallway. He remained motionless, too swift and unnatural directly into the camera. I turned the flashlight towards it, unnervingly but silent. It vanished before I could get a clear view. Sarah my heart raced as I backed away, eyes wide with the oppressive atmosphere. I replayed the segment around multiple times. Okay, each viewing confirming the figure's eerie stillness. Making my way back towards the front door. Never turned away, for the handle. There. The rotary phone began to ring over us. The sound footage abruptly cut out before we could glean any more information. The urge to flee, leaving us with the need to understand what was happening. Determined summoning to every ounce of courage. I delved deeper into the case. 911. Late nights spent poring over records and interviewing witnesses yielded nothing. Until I stumbled upon an old newspaper article buried in the archives. Leave. It detailed a similar incident from decades earlier. My hands shaking uncontrollably near the same intersection. The knocking reached a fever pitch. His body inexplicably the sound moved blending overnight. With the ethereal whispers details that mirrored our case eerily. My mind raced, including the sighting of a shadowy figure on security footage. It was a simple I researched, devoid of any supernatural lore or cases of unidentified men. I grabbed my flashlight and headed towards the front door. All linked to the same now morphing into a sinister rhythm. Each incident shared the haunting presence of the mysterious as I pushed figure. The door open, an apparition, a blast of icy wind hit in the cold. The temperature plummeting in an instant. One particularly the street lamp outside flickered as I sat alone casting in erratic shadows. The oppressive silence was shattered by the sound of footsteps approaching. The cold biting through my uniform, my heart pounding, making me shiver. Saw nothing. The knocking air grew colder, replaced by an eerie silence in the icy air pressed as a chill ran down my spine. I glanced back at the house. I called out. This dark my windows staring above like empty eyes. No response. The door now firmly closed. Out of suddenly, the corner of my eye, body camera began to malfunction. A fleeting shadow flickering through the doorway, distorting the surroundings, disappearing into the darkness. Trying to reset my flashlight and followed, but it remained my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. Panic set in as I realized I navigated the labyrinthine halls of standing as a silent sentinel to the drop further. As I turned to flickering ominously, a figure materialized at the edge of my flashlight's beam, morphing into indistinct shapes pale that taunted me with their presence. Its eyes hollow and devoid of life. Nervously, it reached out struggling to cut through the enveloping gloom. Pleading and menacing. I reached the refrigerated unit in my throat as I struggled to maintain cold composure. Radiating from his lifeless body, I demanded, like an invisible force. My voice barely masking the fear. The air was filled with a figure remained silent. Mournful wail, his presence overwhelming. Sound that echoed through the air around us, thick with sending shivers down my spine. I took a step back. I turned. The apparition revealing the shadowy figure standing, its eyes just fixed on mine with an intensity staring that pierced directly into my eyes. I turned. Why are you here? My demand pounding against the pavement, cracking under the weight of fear. The engine remained silent, but the oppressive feeling of being filled with an unspoken sorrow, clinging to me like a second surge of empathy. I glanced in the rearview mirror, untimely half expecting to see the ghostly figure. Tell me what you need. But there was nothing. Stepping closer, just the empty street, the shadows around us seemed to pulse as I drove away. The house receded with unresolved pain and anguish. Its secrets remaining began to within its walls. The edges of rest of the night dissolving into the darkness. The events leaving behind only the echo of his silent plea. I reported the incident. Move on, but the evidence was the apparition whispered. No recordings. The words carried no physical evidence. Just my own harrowing experience, determined to honor his request. But the memory of that myself to uncovering the truth behind strange occurrences began to follow me. Each case led me deeper into a web of corruption and hidden agendas moving on their own. The city's underbelly ever-present feeling that were meant to stay buried. My body camera became clear that these men were not victims of mere accidents for the distorted night of the call to Elmwood Drive, but pawns in a larger, answers, more sinister delving game. Into the history the shadowy of the figure became a constant uncovering tales of tragedy and loss. A reminder of the lives perished in a devastating fire years ago. Each spirits rumored I found myself drawn back to the morgue, forever trapped the ghostly apparition moments. Urging me skepticism to dig deeper, among my peers to expose the darkness to share my that had claimed so many souls. The line between belief and disbelief blurring as the supernatural seemed to encroach with a ferocity that mirrored determined to understand. I received a call the house change everything. Armed with new equipment, we need you to investigate a report at Oak Street. The night was colder. Unidentified body hidden behind thick clouds similar to previous cases. As without hesitation, the house I grabbed my coat and made my way through the blinding staring snow. Back like empty the city's sockets. Lights obscured by the relentless storm. The air heavy arriving at the smoke and despair. I was greeted by the same eerie silence that had become all too familiar. That echoed through the halls. The body lay half buried in the snow. Navigating the charred remains of the living room, frozen the flickering beam of my flashlight as I began to secure the scene. In the corner, my eyes caught the sight of the shadowy figure once more. His presence standing just beyond the perimeter, still ethereal. His presence as haunting as ever. It whispered, my heart the word vibrating through my very core. I stood my ground. I hesitated, determined to confront the apparition that had haunted my every waking moment. Why are you doing this place? I demanded. My voice steady despite the figure began to move. The figure stepped towards the staircase, the sorrow in his eyes palpable. I followed. They took everything to the second floor where the screams had originated. You must bring them to justice. The fireplace cold and lifeless, eternal winter. Yet the oppressive weight of his words undeniable heavily on my shoulders. The door slammed undeniable. The knocking turning into a frenzied rhythm that mirrored shadowy organization. The temperature plummeted, hidden beneath layers of secrecy in the icy air. I knew what I had to twisted and danced over the following weeks. The spirits Laura of the Whitaker family reliving their gathering evidence and building a case that would expose the hidden forces coalesced into a chorus of despair. The shadowy figure remained a overlapping in a haunting his symphony. Presence a beacon of the truth that needed to be unveiled. I felt a surge of empathy. Finally, the pain after of their eternal relentless resonating within me. The corruption was exposed. What can I do to help you find the perpetrators brought to justice? My resolve, the winter of 1995 gave way to a new dawn. The shadows and echoes of the tangible melting away as the city began to heal. The spirits but the memory of that shadowy figure lingered. Their presence a constant reminder of the thin veil that between life and death. I continued my work with a renewed sense the edge of the room. The lessons learned from those haunted my very soul, guiding me through the darkness. You must remember us. Whenever a storm approaches, lead spirit in tone. I can't help but think of the frozen echoes of those lost sorrows. Their
Remember
story
our
is a
lives,
testament to the
our
enduring
love,
power of
our
truth
loss.
and the
I
unbreakable
nodded,
spirit of those
understanding
who seek
that
justice.
acknowledgement
The
was the
ghostly
key to their
apparition on
release.
Oak Street
I
stands
remember,
as a silent
I remember
guardian,
your family,
ensuring that
your
the past
tragedy.
is never forgotten.
I'm sorry for
and
what
that
happened.
peace is finally
As the words
found in the
left my
heart of
lips,
Chicago's
the
relentless
oppressive
winter.
atmosphere began to lift.
Story number
The
6.
spirits
Forms fading into the light that
Whispers
now
of
filled
Flight
the room.
401.
The knocking ceased.
I still wake up
replaced
in the
by
dead
a
of
serene
night.
silence
The
that
echoes
spoke
of that
peace
January
and closure.
crash reverberating
The house
through
no
my
longer
dreams
felt like
a
a
haunting
prison but a
refrain.
sanctuary
It was
for the
supposed to be
restless
just
souls
another
to finally
routine
move
night
on.
shift at
I
Eastern
left the
Airlines
house that
maintenance
night with
facility,
a profound sense
nestled
of relief.
on the fringes
the weight
of the
of the
Everglades
encounter
in Florida.
lifting from my shoulders.
But that night changed
the strange
everything.
occurrences
Blurring
that
the
had plagued
lines
me
between
ceased.
reality
the feeling
and the
of being
supernatural
watched
in ways I
replaced
couldn't
by
have
a comforting
imagined.
sense of calm.
Flight
The Whitaker
401
house
had been
stood
one of our
silent
best.
once more, a
Its
state-of-the-art
haunted
Boeing
legacy finally
727,
laid to rest.
carrying
Years have
101
passed since
souls
that
to
fateful
destinations unknown.
But the memory of
the
the
Everglades
midnight
were
knock
no
remains
stranger
a stark
to storms,
reminder of the
but that
unseen
January
forces
night
that
brought a
inhabit our
tempest
world.
unlike
I
any
continue
other.
my patrols
Heavy
with a
rains
newfound
lashed against
respect
the
for the
aircraft
mysteries
as it
that
struggled
lie
to
beyond our
navigate the
understanding.
turbulent skies.
The line
I
between
remember the
reality
urgency
and the
in the
supernatural
dispatch
forever
calls,
blurred by
the
my
frantic
experience
voices
at Elmwood
scrambling
Drive.
to maintain
Whenever a
composure
storm
as the
rages
storm
outside,
intensified.
I can't
When the
help
call
but think
came
of the
in,
spirits I
it was all
encountered.
chaos.
Their whispers
Flight
a solemn
401,
reminder of the fragility
maintain
of life
altitude,
and the enduring
the
power
pilot
of
barked.
empathy. His
The
voice
Whitaker house
strained over
stands
the
as a
static.
testament to the
Seconds
souls
later,
that seek peace.
there was silence.
Their stories etched
followed
into
by
the
a
very
desperate
fabric
plea
of
for
the
help
night,
that cut through
waiting
the noise
for
like
someone
a
to
knife.
listen and
The crash
remember.
was inevitable.
So,
I share
tragic
my
end
story
to what
not
should
just
have
as
been
a
a
cautionary
smooth
tale, but as a
We lost
tribute to the
contact
lives
within
lost
minutes,
and the spirits that
and the
linger.
search and
A
rescue
reminder
teams
that
were deployed
sometimes
immediately.
the most
In the
terrifying
aftermath,
encounters are those
the
that
facility
challenge
was
our
swarming
perception of
with
the world and our
investigators,
place within it. Journalists and grieving families. My role was to oversee the salvage operations, ensuring that every part of the wreckage was accounted for and documented. The Everglades had a way of swallowing tragedies, hiding secrets beneath layers of mud and vegetation. But Flight 401's crash site was meticulously searched, every inch combed for survivors or clues. Weeks turned into months, and the physical evidence of the crash was painstakingly pieced together. We salvaged parts from the wreckage, engines, avionics, everything that could be reused or studied. It was during one of these salvage missions that things started to change. It began subtly. I was the first to notice it, a flicker of movement in the reflection of a polished engine part. I dismissed it as fatigue, the long hours taking their toll. But soon, others reported similar sightings. Shadows darting across the facility, figures lingering at the edge of vision, always disappearing when looked at directly. Equipment malfunctioned without reason. Lights dimmed and brightened on their own, and a pervasive feeling of being watched settled over us like a heavy blanket. The most unnerving reports came from the maintenance crews. They spoke of seeing the crew members of Flight 401, ghostly apparitions reenacting their final moments. The captain, a stern man with a commanding presence, was seen pacing the cockpit, his face etched with anguish. Flight attendants floated through the aisles, their eyes vacant, hands reaching out as if trying to grasp something just out of reach. The screams and pleas for help from that tragic night seemed to echo through the halls, a constant reminder of the lives lost. I tried to rationalize it. Stress, exhaustion, perhaps even mass hysteria fueled by the tragedy. But deep down, I knew there was something more sinister at play. The Everglades had a reputation for being a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin. A place where unresolved pain and anger could linger long after the physical world had moved on. One night, as the facility lay silent under the cover of darkness, I decided to confront the phenomenon head-on. Armed with a flashlight and a voice recorder, I ventured into the heart of the wreckage area, determined to capture evidence of the inexplicable occurrences. The air was thick with humidity, the scent of rain mingling with the metallic tang of aircraft parts. My footsteps echoed softly as I navigated through the maze of debris, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, my breath visible in the cold air. The flashlight flickered, and I heard a distant scream, vivid and heart-wrenching. I froze, the sound sending shivers down my spine. Instinctively, I pointed the flashlight towards the source, only to see nothing but shadows dancing on the walls.
I turned to leave, but something compelled me to stay. A figure materialized before me, a man in a pilot's uniform, his face contorted in fear and desperation. His eyes locked onto mine, and I felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow emanating from him. "Help us," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "What do you want?" The apparition reached out a hand, his fingers trembling. "Remember us. Remember what happened." Before I could respond, the figure dissolved into mist, leaving me alone with the heavy silence of the Everglades night. My heart pounded in my chest as I backed away, the weight of his plea settling over me. I knew then that Flight 401's tragedy was far from over, that the spirits of those lost were still seeking closure, still yearning for their stories to be told. Determined to find answers, I delved deeper into the crash reports and eyewitness accounts. I discovered that Flight 401 had encountered a rare and powerful storm, one that had overwhelmed even the most experienced pilots. There were whispers of equipment failures, of a fatal misjudgment that led to the crash. But the official reports were sparse, the truth buried beneath layers of technical jargon and procedural language. Late one night, as I pored over old flight logs and maintenance records, the ghostly captain appeared once more. This time, he was standing beside me, his presence more tangible, his expression one of profound sadness. "You need to know the truth," he said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. I nodded, unable to speak. "Tell me." He gestured to the logs, pointing out inconsistencies and overlooked details. There was a malfunction, something that was covered up. We never had a chance to rectify it. You must expose what happened here. As he spoke, the pieces began to fall into place. The storm had triggered a cascade of failures, ones that our team had desperately tried to manage but ultimately couldn't control. The pressure to conceal the truth had been immense, driven by fear of scandal and repercussions. But the spirits of Flight 401 were relentless, their anguish fueling the paranormal activity that plagued us. With renewed determination, I compiled the evidence, piecing together the fragmented accounts and hidden failures. The truth was undeniable, a dark undercurrent that had led to the tragic loss of so many lives. But exposing it meant facing powerful forces that wanted the story to remain buried, that thrived on the secrecy and pain of Flight 401. One stormy night, as lightning illuminated the dark skies over the Everglades, I prepared to present my findings to the authorities. The facility was eerily quiet, the only sound the distant rumble of thunder and the occasional drip of melting ice. As I stood before the assembled officials, I felt the weight of the spirit's sorrow pressing down on me, a silent plea for justice and remembrance. But before I could begin, the room plunged into darkness. The lights flickered and went out, and the air grew thick with tension. The voice of the captain echoed through the shadows, a haunting reminder of the lives lost. "Remember us," he whispered, his voice fading into the night. The room filled with the spectral presence of Flight 401's crew, their eyes hollow, their expressions etched with pain. "You must not forget," they intoned in unison, their voices blending into a chorus of sorrow and anger. I stood my ground, the courage of the living battling the anguish of the dead. "I remember. I will tell your story." As the lights flickered back on, the apparitions began to fade, their presence lifting as the truth was finally acknowledged. The oppressive atmosphere dissipated, replaced by a serene stillness that spoke of closure and peace. The spirits of Flight 401 had found the justice they sought, their restless souls finally able to move on. In the weeks that followed, my report shed light on the tragic events that had unfolded on that fateful night in January 1972. The revelations led to reforms in safety protocols and a renewed commitment to transparency within the aviation industry. But more importantly, it honored the memory of those lost, ensuring that their stories would never be forgotten. But sometimes, when the wind howls through the Everglades and the snow blankets the ground, I can still hear the whispers of Flight 401. a haunting reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. And I wake up in the dead of night, knowing that some tragedies leave echoes that linger far beyond the reach of time. Story number 7. Whispers of Brown Mountain. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that January evening on Brown Mountain etched into my mind like the lingering fog that blankets the North Carolina skyline. It was supposed to be a simple hiking trip, a way to escape the relentless pace of city life and reconnect with nature. Instead, it became a descent into a nightmare that blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about the legends that haunted these ancient woods. Brown Mountain has always held a mysterious allure. Nestled in the heart of North Carolina, it rises majestically against the horizon, its peak often shrouded in mist and mystery. For centuries, locals have spoken of the Brown Mountain lights, glowing orbs that dance above the treetops on cold January nights. Some say they are the spirits of Native Americans, victims of tragic massacres, forever wandering the mountains in search of peace. Skeptics dismiss them as natural phenomena, reflections of distant lights or atmospheric anomalies. But I had always been intrigued, not just by the stories, but by the allure of uncovering the truth behind the legend. It was the first week of January when I decided to explore Brown Mountain with my friend, Emily. We were both avid hikers, always seeking the next adventure that nature could offer. The winter air was crisp, each breath a visible puff that quickly dissolved into the cold night. As we ascended the narrow trails, the forest around us seemed to come alive with the whispers of the past, the rustling leaves and snapping twigs creating a symphony of sounds that both comforted and unsettled us. By late afternoon, we reached a clearing that offered a panoramic view of the surrounding valleys. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows that danced with the fading light. We set up our camp, the warmth of the fire a welcome respite against the chill that crept in as night fell. As darkness enveloped the mountain, the temperature dropped further, the air growing colder with each passing hour. Around midnight, as we sat by the fire sharing stories and sipping hot cocoa, Emily mentioned the Brown Mountain lights. "They say you can see them from here," she said, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "On nights like tonight, when the air is cold and still, the lights appear out of nowhere, hovering above the trees." I nodded, the legend resonating with the eerie beauty of our surroundings. "I've always wanted to see them. Maybe tonight's the night." We decided to stay up and watch, the anticipation building as the hours ticked by. The forest was silent, the only sounds being the crackling of the fire and the occasional howl of a distant coyote. As the clock struck 2 in the morning, the temperature plummeted, our breaths visible in the frigid air. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared in the distance, hovering just above the treetops. It was subtle at first, a soft blue light that seemed to pulse gently in the darkness. "Look," I whispered, pointing towards the glow. Emily followed my gaze, her eyes wide with wonder and a hint of fear. The light began to grow brighter, more defined, moving with an ethereal grace that defied explanation. It danced above the trees, shifting colors from blue to green to a ghostly white, casting an otherworldly glow on the snow-covered ground below. As we watched in awe, the lights seemed to respond to our presence, swirling and twinkling in intricate patterns that felt almost deliberate. The air grew colder still, the silence around us thick with an unspoken tension. I felt a shiver run down my spine, the legends of restless spirits whispering through the trees as the lights continued their mesmerizing display. "Do you think they're the spirits they say?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible over the soft hum of the lights. I hesitated, the rational part of my mind struggling to reconcile the beauty of the lights with the dark stories they carried. Maybe, or maybe it's just some natural phenomenon we don't understand yet. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the lights than met the eye. The legends had always hinted at something deeper, something rooted in pain and tragedy. And as the night wore on, the lights began to shift, the patterns becoming more chaotic, the colors darker, almost menacing. Suddenly, the lights coalesced into distinct shapes, shadowy figures standing amidst the glow, their forms barely discernible but undeniably human. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized we were witnessing the spirits themselves, their presence palpable in the cold night air. The figures moved with a haunting grace, their eyes hollow, reflecting centuries of sorrow and longing. Emily gasped, clutching my arm. "Tom, do you see that?" I nodded, unable to tear my gaze away. The spirits seemed to be reenacting scenes of their past, moments of anguish and despair that had bound them to this place. One figure, a woman with flowing hair and a mournful expression, reached out as if trying to touch something just out of reach. Another, a man with a stern face and weary eyes, stood by a ruined cabin, his posture heavy with defeat. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, the sorrow of the spirits echoing through the clearing. I felt a surge of empathy, the weight of their suffering pressing down on me. "We need to help them," I whispered, the words carrying a sense of urgency I didn't fully understand. As if in response, the temperature dropped further, the air growing thick with an unspoken plea. The spirits turned towards us, their eyes meeting ours with a depth of sorrow that transcended time. The woman with flowing hair stepped forward, her voice a soft, mournful whisper that seemed to resonate within my very soul. "Remember us," she whispered, her voice echoing through the night. "Remember our pain. Let our stories be told." I felt a profound sadness wash over me, the realization that these spirits were trapped in their eternal torment, their stories forgotten by the living. "I promise," I vowed, my voice steady despite the tears welling up in my eyes. "I will remember you. I will tell your stories." The spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving into the light as if their sorrow had been acknowledged and understood. The greenish glow softened, the lights returning to their gentle dance above the trees. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a serene stillness that spoke of peace and closure. As dawn broke, the first light of morning casting long shadows across the clearing, Emily and I sat in silence, the weight of the night's events settling over us. The legends of Brown Mountain had always been intriguing, but now they held a deeper, more personal meaning. We had witnessed the sorrow and pain of the spirits, their restless souls finally finding a semblance of peace in the acknowledgement of their suffering. Determined to honor our promise, I dedicated myself to uncovering the true history of Brown Mountain, delving into old records and speaking with local historians to piece together the fragmented stories of those who had perished here. The more I learned, the clearer the picture became. Brown Mountain had been the site of countless tragedies, the lives lost in the unforgiving winter weather and the violence of conflicts long forgotten. One particularly cold evening, as I sat poring over old newspaper clippings and faded photographs, I came across a series of reports detailing the mysterious deaths that had plagued the mountain over the years. Native American tribes had once thrived here, their lives intertwined with the land. But a dark chapter of betrayal and violence had left deep scars that still lingered in the mountain's shadow. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the clearing on Brown Mountain, determined to ensure that the spirit stories were heard and remembered. As I stood alone beneath the vast expanse of the night sky, the stars twinkling like distant beacons, I felt a connection to the past that transcended time and space. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the echoes of the lost souls, their voices now a part of the mountain's eternal song. I set up my camera and notebook, ready to document the truth that had been hidden for so long. The lights began to appear once more, their glow soft and welcoming, a sign that the spirits were at peace. I watched as they danced above the trees, their presence a reminder of the enduring resilience of the human spirit and the importance of remembering those who came before us. Years have passed since that fateful January night, but the lessons learned on Brown Mountain remain a haunting reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. I continue to share the stories of the lost souls, ensuring that their pain and suffering are never forgotten. The Brown Mountain lights continue to illuminate the night, a beacon of hope and remembrance amidst the darkness. Whenever a cold winter night descends upon North Carolina, I find myself gazing towards Brown Mountain, the lights dancing above the trees like silent sentinels guarding the secrets of the past. The whispers of the spirits linger in the air, a solemn vow that their stories will be told and their memories honored. And as long as those lights shine, the legacy of Brown Mountain will endure, a testament to the power of empathy and the enduring quest for peace.